Hello humans, welcome back to the Meditative Aiden YouTube channel where we talk about mindfulness and how mindfulness can help you work through the challenges and experiences of everyday life. My name is Aiden and today we're going to be talking about how to stick with mindful practices. In today's video we're going to be talking first about what makes it difficult for us to stick with mindfulness practices and our habits in general, things that keep us healthy and alive. And then we're going to talk about how we can do something about that using the Kaizen method. I think that you guys will find today's video really informative and hopefully you guys will learn a little bit from it. So without further ado, let's just get to it. So I don't know about you, but I'm a pretty busy guy. You know, I've got a ton going on all the time. I've got, my job where I work so many hours a week. I've got everything I'm doing for you guys, putting out content. I've got all the things I need to do around our little living space, on top of all the things that I have to do to get ready for school that's coming up again here in a couple of weeks. And between all of these things going on and when school actually starts, it's really difficult for me to find time to sit down and meditate. And it's also really difficult for me to find time to do the things that I need to keep me healthy, such as exercising, gratitude journaling, and all those things. We live in a world where so much is demanded of us, so much is expected of us. We have so many commitments, so many things going on that it just is really difficult to find time to do these things. And if we do find the time, we quickly relapse back into just doing what it takes to get by. And the thing is, we can't really reduce, the number of hours we work at our jobs because we still have to put food on the table, right? So we have to ask, what is it that we can really do about these practices and things that help keep us fresh inside and alive? Like, what can we do to keep those habits going? And that's what we're going to be addressing mostly in today's video is, what can we do? And fundamentally, between all of the commitments we have, all the things going on, there's one underlying factor that makes it really difficult for us to pursue those dreams and those goals and those ideas that we have. And that is, we take steps that are too big. Now, I'd like to illustrate this with a personal example. When I first started meditating, I actually hated it because I sat down and I was trying to meditate for the full 20 minutes with my legs crossed and everything. And I was sitting down and I was trying to empty my mind and I really became frustrated very quickly. And instead of making progress towards my goal of becoming more mindful, I actually started making progress backwards. So instead of feeling a greater sense of mindfulness develop and stuff like that, I ended up moving backwards, and eventually mindfulness just became something that I just wasn't good enough to do. It just became another one of those things that fell by the wayside. As I mentioned before, this was primarily an issue because I was trying to do the whole meditation thing all at once. I was trying to do the whole step and go through the whole process like a real enlightened guru right from the very beginning. And that wasn't very realistic. Now, I don't know if you've seen the show What About Bob, but it is an amazing comedy about this guy named Bob who's played by Bill Murray. And Bob has a variety of different mental illnesses. Between severe social anxiety and a really, really severe form of OCD, he had a very, very difficult time living. And after exhausting a few therapists, he ended up with a different therapist that was supposed to be like the number one in his league or whatever. In their first counseling session, Bob and his therapist were talking, and the therapist was trying to explain to Bob that it takes time to make progress. Now, the therapist in this movie has a massive ego, so immediately he starts trying to market his new book to Bob. And this book that he's written is called Baby Steps. And at first Bob looks kind of confused. He's just like, I don't get it. What does baby steps have to do with anything? After a moment, a smile lights up his face, his eyes start shining as he seems to get it. And what he does is he stands up and he starts taking baby steps around the therapist's office. And he's smiling like, look, I got it. I understand. Take baby steps. And he starts walking in circles around the therapist. And when the therapist finally makes him leave, he walks, using baby steps out of the office and to the elevator, and then walks all the way home using baby steps, unknowingly the whole time offending the therapist. I love this movie. It is so funny, and for all of its laughs, it actually has a pretty interesting principle in the beginning here, because Bob was trying to solve all of his problems and all of his challenges with OCD and social anxiety by coming to some radical change all at once. He wanted all of it to go away in one therapy session. And the thing is that that's not really how it works. And that's what the therapist was trying to tell him with this book. Ego aside, he was trying to say, Bob, you've got to take smaller steps because it's going to take a while to make a progress with the different challenges that you face. In relation to baby steps, I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts a couple of years ago, which was at the time The Art of Manliness. I loved listening to those guys. And there was a specific podcast that they were airing at the time called the Kaizen Method. And I was just, I turned it on the drive home, I was listening to it. I was actually kind of surprised a little ways into it to realize the profound simplicity of the Kaizen Method, and yet its ability to illustrate really magnificent results for positive growth over time. So the Kaizen Method is something that I want to describe to you in a little more detail and how it has a relationship with our mindful practices and being able to find time to do things to keep us healthy between all of our commitments. So first and foremost, the word Kaizen is a Japanese word that can be broken down into two components. The first word is kai, which means continuous, and then zen means improvement. So what this word means, the Kaizen method, can really be interpreted to mean the method of continuous improvement. What this suggests is that instead of making radical changes over time, and trying to change everything all at once, we make incremental changes one step at a time. Where did Kaizen start? So Kaizen started shortly after World War II. Japan was having a really difficult time with its economy afterwards. As you can imagine, most countries have a difficult time with their economy after war. I mean, for one, if your entire country just got bombed, all of your industry is really shattered on top of the disastrous effects of wartime efforts, putting all of your economy towards developing everything you can to win a war. So after World War II, a couple of American specialists went over to Japan to try to help them kickstart their economy. And at the time, a lot of these Japanese companies were trying to make radical changes. They were trying to do a lot of big things to modify the way that their companies were working so that they could have instantaneous growth. They were trying to change the whole way that their companies worked and their products were so that they could find that growth and resume their normal economical functioning. But with the help of these American specialists, they developed the Kaizen method. And what this Kaizen method emphasized was that instead of pursuing radical change, pursue small incremental changes instead. So what this meant is that instead of trying to change your product entirely, try to change your product 1% at a time. Try to make it 1% better every day. And the thing is that the Japanese economy speaks for itself today. And in fact, the Toyota car company actually has some of the most well-known and reliable cars in the world, as far as my experience goes. For example, I had a 1999 Toyota Camry for a long time, and my parents drove it before me, but when I was driving it, it got up to 250,000 miles. The thing is, it actually broke down because I forgot to change the oil, and I was racing some friends to get home on the way home from work one day. Nonetheless, it wasn't actually the manufacturer's fault for the car breaking down, it was my fault for neglecting to take care of it. Nonetheless, the reliability of Toyota in their cars says a lot because they use this Kaizen method to improve the quality of their products so that they could have really well-rounded and efficient, reliable, durable cars. There are also a lot of other companies around the world that have used the Kaizen method and have obtained enormous growth. And some of those companies, for example, include Lockheed Martin, the Ford Motor Company, and Pixar Animation Studios. Those three are like some of the biggest companies in the world, or at least some of the most well-known for producing really quality products. Now, the Kaizen method can be broken down into a couple of steps. It can be boiled down to a process. And the first part of this process is determining the smallest step that you can take towards success. What this means is that you are determining what it is that you can do to make your product or your life 1% better by the smallest increment. The second component is taking that change and taking that step and putting it into action regularly, so that you can see that change over time. The third step is to stop and ask yourself if this change is actually working. Is this effective? Are you trying to take too big of a step? Is this small enough? Is it too small? Questions like that to help you determine whether or not the step that you're taking is efficient and sufficient for what you need. And the fourth component is just reviewing how that whole process went and determining if you're ready to go on with another step. And it starts over and goes in this constant cycle of improvement, of understanding what the smallest step you can take to make an improvement is, making that improvement, figuring out how that improvement has worked, and then reviewing all of it to then go back through the cycle. So in relation to real life, I mean, it's one thing to talk about that, like in relation to car manufacturers, because it's easy for them to say, okay, I'm going to improve the quality of this by 1%. Or, if an employee is looking at something that they're designing, it's really easy for them to look at it and see something they can change that's small that they know will make the car better. But when it comes to our personal lives, it's a little more difficult, because sometimes it's hard to pinpoint things and say, well, I think if I did this one thing 1% better, everything would be better. So to illustrate this, I want to give you a personal example of when I first started utilizing the Kaizen method. So at the time that I was listening to the aforementioned podcast on the art of manliness, I was trying to develop a stronger habit of exercising. So my goal at the time was to exercise for 30 minutes right when I woke up for 5 days a week. And the thing is that very quickly after I developed this idea, I started falling short of it, because I would only wake up and do that 1 or 2 times a week, if that. And I really became discouraged with myself because I was falling short of the goal that I had set. And it became one of those things where I felt like I wasn't good enough to do it, and I started beating myself up, and it just never ended. So what I started doing instead is defining my measurement of success differently. So using the Kaizen method, I said, what is the smallest step that I can take to plant the seed for physical fitness? What is the first thing that I can do that will help get me into the gym? And what I decided is that I would measure my success instead of by, having this 30-minute workout, as by just getting into the gym. Success was measured by how often I was able to just walk into the gym. So I was living with my parents at the time, and they had this little in-home gym in the basement. And I would tell myself that right after I woke up, if I was able to go downstairs and just walk into the gym, that was success. And this seemed really weird at first for me. It was kind of uncomfortable because there was a lot of shame with that. Like, I'm not even working out, I can barely walk in the gym and that's it. But what I was doing was laying the foundation for the rest of my exercise habits. Because eventually, after a week or 2 of just walking into the gym, I would walk in and do a push-up. And then after some time just walking in and doing 1 push-up, I would do 2, and then 3, and then maybe a couple of sit-ups. And it eventually got to a point where I was able to have 15-minute workouts in the morning, every morning for 5 weeks. And this wasn't, necessarily the target goal that I was aiming for, but nonetheless, I found so much more fulfillment in actually being able to work towards that and enjoy my 15-minute workouts, because I had developed a habit over time to make that happen. So if you're trying to get in better shape, or you like riding your bike, or there's something fulfilling for you that you'd like to do more often, the first step is to figure out what is the smallest thing you can do, what is the smallest step you can take to start moving forward and lay that foundation. So if you like riding your bike, you might just go and touch your bike or stand next to it. And then you might, start wheeling it up and down your driveway or something like that. Similarly, if you like drawing, you might just try looking at your notebook once a week or something like that, and slowly working it up until you're drawing once a week or drawing every day. And the point is that whatever it is that you want to accomplish, you've got to start with something small, bite-sized, and something more manageable. So specifically when it came to mindfulness and developing mindful practices for me, initially where I was trying to sit down for 20 minutes and meditate and do the whole thing, I defined my personal success in the beginning by being able to just sit down where I was going to meditate. So what this meant is that at the end of every day, I would go and sit in my bed upright for 10 seconds. And that's all that I would do, is just sit upright for 10 seconds. Didn't matter what I was doing as long as I was sitting in that bed. And then using that Kaizen method process, I determined that I wanted to take it to the next step. So accordingly, I started sitting down for 20 seconds and then 30 seconds. And eventually I got to a point where I was able to use a guided meditation for 3 minutes while sitting in bed. And this wasn't my goal. I know I wanted to meditate for longer than that, but I had reached somewhere where I was actually meditating. And then after that, it got to a point where I was able to meditate for 20 minutes before bed every single day, 7 days a week. And the purpose of all of this is to demonstrate that when you're developing any kind of practice, or you're trying to do something or incorporate a few more things that you enjoy that bring fulfillment to your life, whether that be mindfulness related or fitness or anything that keeps you healthy, the point is that in order to make progress with that, to turn it into a habit, you've got to make it manageable. You've got to make it bite-sized. Because if you expect yourself to meet this grand expectation at first, you're not going to make it. Unless you're one of those freaks that, just has that amazing sense of motivation. And I really admire those people. They're cool, but I don't want to talk to them. As I've used the Kaizen method personally, I've been able to find that when I sit down and perform meditations, I'm able to do it with a greater sense of fulfillment. And also, I occasionally will fall off the track. I won't be able to meditate as frequently as I'd like. And instead of trying to immediately get right back to where I was before, I realize now that instead of trying to do that, I'm going to take the incremental steps that I need to work back up to that level where I'm able to meditate for 20 minutes a day. And the thing is that the Kaizen method can apply to so many different things. It definitely applies to businesses and personal life, but it doesn't just have to be with, physical fitness or, emotional health. It can also be in relation to other people. So you can set a goal, for example, where you want to be able to talk to people more often, or you want to engage in conversation more often. And something you might do to that end is, using the Kaizen method, determine that maybe the smallest step that you can take towards that is to start just by saying hi to people. And then you might move onwards to try to make a small conversation, even using the weather or something like that. The point is that the Kaizen method is applicable to a wide range of different opportunities for growth. So fundamentally, our practices suffer, our habits suffer when we try to take too big of steps. And the point of this video is to say that when you take everything and make it into manageable bite-sized steps, you're able to find a greater sense of accomplishment and success in your life, whether that be with your goals or with your work or whatever it is, what have you. And none of this is to say that you shouldn't set goals and you shouldn't set ambitious goals at that. By all means, you need to go set those goals and work towards them. But the point is to recognize that when you set those goals, no matter how ambitious they are, you've got to make the steps manageable and bite-sized. I mean, you may want to perform in a triathlon or perform in an Ironman someday, but if you try working out for 4 hours a day from the get-go, like is recommended for those feats, you're going to find yourself falling short of that. And of course, there are a few of you that might be able to actually do that. But the point is that you've got to work up to that level. You can't train for an Ironman overnight. It takes a lot of deliberate effort. And on top of that, it takes step-by-step sequential deliberate effort. And that goes for just about anything in life. I hope that from this, you're able to get an understanding of how to take your habits and the things that are going on in your life and make them a little bit more manageable and bite-sized, so that you're not beating yourself up about them and not having a difficult time trying to actually accomplish them. And I hope that through the use of the Kaizen method and making things bite-sized, you're able to find that greater sense of success and accomplishment. I really hope that you enjoyed today's video. I really hope that it was informative. If you want to read more, you can check out the blog post on meditativeaiden.com. The blog post is titled How to Stick with Mindful Practices. You can also check out the Meditative Aiden Podcast, where we've got a podcast on this as well. And don't forget that you can like and follow Meditative Aiden on Instagram and Facebook for just daily advice and guidance for just getting through every single day. If you liked today's video, please make sure to let me know by commenting below and subscribing. And other than that, guys, again, I really hope you enjoyed today's video. I hope it was helpful for you, and I'll see you guys next time.